Now, Grant, do you believe that demands for higher wages will really lead to inequality?
Well, if you look at the research that was conducted in the report, all indications are from a purely economic perspective that it does push that index out, and inevitably with the further unemployment, the inequalities pick up at the end of the day, yes.
But what sort of inequality are we talking about? Is it about the wage gap between middle management?
It's about the wage gap.
Now,
It is about the wage gap, yes.
Now, is it that difficult, though, for employers to meet the demands of their workers, you think?
I think we have to paint demand in context. South Africa is not an island, and the industry is not an island as well. There's various costs to take into account. And, one has to look at the demands and again, balance it out between employer and employee and try and find the best way forward to grow and obviously give a decent increase, but by the same token, not in such a way hamper the future growth. Often what we're seeing with increased demands is that the demands are high, and should the organizations or companies eventually give in to the demands, one inevitably awaits a retrenchment process shortly thereafter, unfortunately.
Now we're talking about inequality, but how can a third world economy like South Africa close that very huge inequality gap that we have? Is there a possibility that that can happen?
There's no silver bullet. I don't think there's something a long and short answer of it. It's a socio-economic issue, not just a labor issue, and we have a high influx of unskilled labor available and a low demand. And inevitably, in the labor market, it's all about supply and demand. And inevitably, we have to find ways that legitimate business can operate more effectively. And I'm quite pertinent in the use of the word legitimate. I'm not in any way trying to promote business that's conducting illegitimate or illegal activity. That business itself can survive and flourish, and in that way create job opportunities and real jobs for people going forward, yes.
But then who needs to play that role to close that inequality gap? Is it business, or is it government, or is it both?
I think it's a combination. Remember, our system's a tripartite system, where it involves the trade unions, business, and government. And I think it's time that strong leaders on each side stands up and sets down certain policy documents and policy structures that allow the growth of that particular business and inevitably the runoff to employees. A lot of responsibility does sit on government, but inevitably it's a three-way conversation, definitely.
Now, in the report, the authors looked at the question of affordability, but it also looked at labor cost and profits over the past 13 years. Are they suggesting that in the past 13 years there was more profits and the workers didn't get any share of that?
There's argument either way there. If you look at it, I think inevitably there are profits made, but inevitably there are resource costs, there are machinery costs, there are labor costs, all that to be covered. And I suppose, depending which side of the coin you sit on, depends whether you feel there has been sufficient distribution of same or not.
The question of affordability, especially in the mining industry, is that a real question that we need to deal with?
Definitely. If you look at the increases that were provided and where the potential increase places these chaps, a few of these guys will be earning more than educationalists. They'll be earning in the top couple of percent. I think it was 25% of earners in South Africa potentially. And one has to really analyze that and say, is there a pay versus productivity? Is there a return on investment in terms of that increase? And in South Africa at the moment, statistics clearly show that the pay versus productivity, there's a total disjoint between the two. We're probably ranking in the bottom section. I think we lost actually, or somewhere towards the bottom of that list worldwide. So in other words, the productivity one gets for the pay one gives is not matching. Salary goes up. In fact, research was done recently where salaries were increased and the productivity, in fact, had dropped proportionately.
So you are suggesting that there should be a link between productivity and increases?
100%. It will work out wonderfully well. There's a company here in Cape Town that made that suggestion where, if we can only afford X% increase, but we want to make certain that we do, as far as possible, try and benefit the employees as well. So we have a suggestion, for instance, where if you meet a certain scrapping target, which was very reasonable, you'll get X%. At that stage, the company had, in essence, if the guys had sat down and done the calculations, sat with a 12% increase. The company was at, I think, 7 or something like that. Mm-hmm. And inevitably, the trade union took the view of, I want to have the increase on the table, full stop. I don't want to link to anything else. and they walked away with an 8.5% increase rather than the 12% that was potentially there. And I think we just need to, as the parties on the table, find ways that we can increase the size of that pie, and then once that pie is increased, share it accordingly. At the moment, the positional-based bargaining structure that we're facing, where we're moving towards each other, and we, you as a trade union start at 35%, and eventually as an employer, the guy starts at 3 or 4%, and we gradually move towards each other. That's just making the pie smaller. There's eventually, because of a variety of factors, including violence and strikes, etc., the industries cave a certain percentage, perhaps above what they can afford, knowing, unfortunately, that at some stage there will be retrenchments or restructuring shortly thereafter. And we've seen it across the sectors historically.
Mm-hmm. Now, you did mention it now, because I was going to ask you that question. These double-digit increases, that could lead to retrenchments because it's unaffordable to the employer at the end. And also to mechanization, some have suggested.
Definitely. My suspicions are, through various sources, that there would be, not necessarily, I'm not saying sources in terms of particular specific industry, but from economists and stuff, that inevitably there would be a mechanization process, an automation taking place in the next couple of years, post amendments and post all this action that's taking place. We're seeing a lot of disinvestment as well in South Africa, guys not willing to invest, businesses considering leaving South Africa as a result of the entire labour market currently. So it's a labour market issue, but I think to solve it, it's more of a socio-economic issue, with the labour market being a portion of that and impacting obviously in terms of that.
And then, of course, there's a huge elephant in the room. Gender inequality. Is that another problem that we need to look at and adds to the problems of inequality in the workplace?
Statistics do show that there is gender inequality still taking place. You would know that there was this bill, the wedgie, that was trying to be pushed through. That's currently under discussion and under review again. The targets and the penalties were substantially high, and the social partners wanted to reconsider it on both sides of the table. So one does need to find a way to redress, but again, it's finding a way that the redress takes place proportionately and inevitably fundamentally allowing business still to operate, to allow it to do so. One doesn't want to input legislation into a particular system that inevitably doesn't allow business to operate, and inevitably there won't be jobs. So the conversation will become academic. So yeah, there are inequalities which need to be addressed, and then we need to find proactive ways to deal with those issues up front. Yes.
Grant, thank you so much for your time and joining us here on AM News.
Thank you very much.